Sometimes, life asks us to make the hardest choices, not for ourselves, but for those we love most. Today, I want to share a true story about this grandma, whose quiet strength and love changed her family forever. Stay with me as we walk through a journey of sacrifice, hope, and unbreakable bonds. A true story about this grandma. She sold everything to save her grandson. A journey of love and sacrifice. A quiet house and a heavy heart. There was a stillness in the air that evening, a kind of quiet that seemed to settle deep into the bones of the old house. The soft glow from the single lamp on the worn wooden table cast long shadows across the walls, and the creak of the rocking chair was the only sound breaking the silence. Evelyn sat there, her hands folded gently in her lap, staring out the window where the last slivers of daylight were slipping away. The house was too big for just one person. It had once been filled with laughter, with the sound of children's footsteps running through the halls and the aroma of fresh-baked apple pie lingering in the kitchen. But now, those sounds had faded into memories. The rooms felt empty, echoing with a loneliness that weighed heavier with every passing day. Tonight, Evelyn's thoughts drifted back to a time she often tried to keep at bay, a moment that had forever changed the course of her life. It was a memory filled with heartache, yet it was also the very reason she was still here, still fighting. She reached over to the small wooden box on the table, its surface scratched and worn from years of handling. Inside were letters, photographs, and small trinkets, tokens from a life once full, now reduced to fragments. As her fingers traced the edges of a faded photograph of a young boy with bright eyes and a hopeful smile, her chest tightened. That boy was her grandson, Jacob. The very thought of him brought warmth to her cold, quiet room, but also an ache so sharp it was almost physical. He was the reason she had sold everything she owned: the little house on Maple Street, the land she and her late husband had tended for decades, even the family heirlooms that had been passed down for generations. She never imagined she'd come to this point, alone, with nothing but memories and a relentless hope that her sacrifice would save him. The evening breeze slipped through the cracked window, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and distant rain. Evelyn pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Outside, the world was moving on, indifferent to the quiet struggles within these walls. In her youth, Evelyn had been full of dreams, a vibrant woman who found joy in the simple pleasures, tending her garden, singing old folk songs, baking bread for her family. Her late husband, Henry, had been her rock, a steady presence through good times and bad. Together, they built a home filled with love and laughter. But life, as it often does, had a way of changing its course when least expected. Years ago, when Jacob was just a boy, the family's world shifted. An accident, one that left him fighting for his life. The doctors spoke in hushed tones about the costs, the treatments, the uncertain future. The bills piled up, and the weight of the situation pressed down on Evelyn's shoulders like a storm cloud refusing to pass. Her own children, caught up in their busy lives, struggled to keep up with the demands. And so, it fell to Evelyn, the grandmother, to do whatever it took to keep her beloved grandson alive. The house she sat in now had once been a sanctuary, but it became a place of hard decisions. Each creaking floorboard seemed to remind her of what she was about to give up. The land that had fed them, the home that held their memories, it all had to go. But how does a grandmother say goodbye to the things she loves most? How does she watch the years slip away while holding on to the fragile hope that it will all be worth it? Tonight, the quiet was almost unbearable. Evelyn's eyes welled with tears, but she held them back, knowing that Jacob needed her strength now more than ever. Somewhere out there, he was fighting his own battle, unaware of the sacrifices being made for him. As the clock ticked softly in the background, Evelyn whispered a prayer into the darkening room, a plea for hope, for healing, and for the courage to face whatever lay ahead. She thought of the future, uncertain and frightening, but also filled with the faintest glimmer of possibility. It was that fragile thread of hope that kept her sitting in the rocking chair, night after night, surrounded by silence and memories, ready to face whatever came next. For in that quiet house, beneath the weight of loss and love, a story was unfolding, a story of sacrifice, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a grandmother and her grandson. Meet Evelyn, Grandma at 75. Evelyn Harper was 75 years old, and to look at her on a quiet afternoon, you might see just another elderly woman living in a small town that time seemed to have forgotten. Her silver hair was always neatly pinned back, her hands bearing the faint tremble of age but still steady enough to fold laundry or tend a few wilting plants on her porch. She had the kind of face that told stories, the soft wrinkles around her eyes like gentle whispers of laughter and sorrow, the faint scar just above her left eyebrow, a reminder of a childhood scrape that never quite faded. Her life had settled into a rhythm of simplicity, marked by small daily routines that kept her grounded in the present, while shadows of the past lingered just beneath the surface. Each morning, Evelyn would wake early, before the sun had fully risen, and prepare a pot of tea, her favorite chamomile blend, and sit by the window with a worn quilt draped over her knees. From there, she would watch the world slowly come to life. The neighbors walking their dogs, the school bus rumbling down the street, the familiar faces greeting her with a nod or a smile. But behind that quiet exterior was a well of emotions that ran deep, often unseen by the casual observer. There was a softness in her eyes that betrayed a loneliness she carried like a second skin, a heaviness that came not from age alone, but from years of carrying burdens no one could see. She was no stranger to loss. It had visited her doorstep more times than she cared to count. Her husband, Henry, had passed away nearly a decade earlier. They had been married for 45 years, a partnership built on quiet understanding and shared dreams. Losing him was like losing a part of herself, and while time dulled the sharpest edges of grief, the ache never fully disappeared. Her children, James and Laura, were grown and scattered across the country, busy with their own lives, careers, and families. Phone calls came sporadically, visits even more so. They loved their mother, but the miles and the demands of modern life had stretched their bonds thin. Jacob, her grandson, was the thread that still tied her heart tightly to the world. At 20, he was a young man with a bright future, or at least that's what everyone hoped. But Jacob's health had become a constant worry, a shadow that darkened every joyful moment. Chronic illness had made his path uncertain, and Evelyn found herself stepping into a role she never imagined: protector, caregiver, and sometimes sole provider. Her modest home on Willow Lane was both a sanctuary and a prison. The walls held echoes of laughter from a happier time, but also the silence of long nights spent worrying over medical bills and unanswered phone calls from doctors. The small garden out back, once vibrant with roses and daisies, now grew wild and untamed, much like her thoughts. Evelyn's days were measured not just by the rising and setting sun, but by the rhythms of Jacob's treatments and appointments. She kept a calendar meticulously marked with doctor visits, medication schedules, and reminders to call insurance companies or pharmacy lines. Her purse always contained a crumpled list of phone numbers and notes, a lifeline in the tangled web of healthcare and bureaucracy. Despite the physical toll the years had taken, Evelyn's spirit was far from broken. There was a quiet determination in the way she moved, a steadiness in her voice when she spoke about Jacob that told anyone listening just how fiercely she loved him. It was this love that pushed her forward when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. At night, after making sure Jacob had everything he needed for the next day, Evelyn would sit by the window with a cup of warm tea, letting the silence wash over her. Sometimes she would hum old songs Henry had taught her, melodies that filled the room with memories and made the loneliness feel a little less heavy. Yet, there were moments when the weight of everything, the sacrifices, the uncertainty, the fading connections, would press down on her chest like a heavy stone. She found herself longing for days when life was simpler, when family gathered around the table for Sunday dinners, when Jacob's laughter filled the air instead of the sterile beeps of hospital machines. But those days felt distant now, slipping further away with each passing season. Evelyn knew that time was not on her side, and that made every moment she could hold on to Jacob even more precious. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, she would whisper to the stars, asking for strength, for a miracle, or simply for peace. And though no answers came, those whispered prayers were the threads holding her fragile hope together. Evelyn was a grandmother, a widow, a caretaker, and a woman weathered by life's storms, but still standing. Her story was not one of grandeur or fame, but of quiet courage, the kind that blossoms in the hearts of those who love without condition and fight without surrender. And in the days to come, that courage would be tested in ways she never imagined. Family ties, love and lost moments. Evelyn's life, like the slow turning of the seasons, was deeply rooted in the soil of family. Though time and circumstance had stretched the branches far and wide, the core of her world remained tightly intertwined with those she loved, her children and her grandson, Jacob. Each held a special place in her heart, but not without the tangled threads of joy and sorrow woven through their shared history. Her eldest, James, was a man of quiet strength. He had inherited his father Henry's steady nature, and had built a life in the city working as an engineer. They spoke on the phone occasionally, birthdays, holidays, and when Evelyn mustered the courage to ask. But the distance between them was more than miles. It was the gap of busy lives, competing priorities, and unspoken regrets. James had a family of his own now, 2 young children, and a demanding job. The calls that once brought comfort sometimes ended in frustration, a reminder that time and space had created invisible walls. Laura, Evelyn's daughter, was the youngest and the one closest to her mother's heart. A schoolteacher with a warm smile, she had always been the caregiver in their family, the one who checked in regularly and tried to bridge the widening gaps. But Laura, too, was caught in her own storms. Divorce, financial struggles, and the constant juggle of work and motherhood. Though she lived a mere 2 hours away, visits were infrequent, and conversations often cut short by the demands of daily life. Despite their flaws and failings, Evelyn never doubted the love her children held for her. It was the kind of love that sometimes showed in imperfect ways, through missed calls or forgotten plans. But it was there, quiet, steady, and sometimes hidden beneath the surface. Then there was Jacob, her grandson, the boy who had lit up the family's darkest days with his laughter and spirit. From the moment he was born, Evelyn felt a bond so fierce it caught her breath. She had held him in her arms on a chilly autumn morning, his tiny fingers curling around hers, and in that instant she had vowed to protect him no matter the cost. Jacob had always been a bright and curious child, eager to explore the world with wide eyes and an open heart. He loved baseball, summer days at the park, and the way his grandmother's homemade cookies melted in his mouth. Those simple pleasures were woven into the fabric of his childhood, memories Evelyn treasured like precious jewels. But life had a cruel way of testing even the strongest bonds. When Jacob was 10 years old, his health took a sudden and devastating turn. What started as a persistent cough led to a diagnosis that no family wants to hear, a chronic illness that would change everything. The road ahead was filled with hospital visits, treatments that sapped his energy, and an uncertainty that cast a long shadow over their lives. Evelyn watched as her grandson's bright spirit flickered in the face of pain and fatigue. She held his hand through endless nights of discomfort, whispered words of comfort when the fear crept in, and vowed silently that she would do whatever it took to give him a chance at a normal life. Her children struggled to cope, their own burdens making it difficult to be present as much as they wished. Evelyn became the pillar of strength, juggling caregiving with managing the household, the bills, and the never-ending stream of appointments. Their family gatherings grew fewer and further between. The sounds of laughter that once filled the house were replaced by quiet conversations in hospital waiting rooms and long drives to specialists. Birthdays were celebrated with small parties, often subdued by worry. Holidays became bittersweet reminders of what was lost and what still hung in the balance. There were moments of warmth, shared stories, comforting embraces, and glimpses of hope that reminded them of the resilience they carried. But there were also moments of tension and sorrow, when exhaustion and fear frayed nerves and tested patience. Evelyn often found herself caught between hope and despair, a tightrope walker balancing the weight of love and loss. She treasured the small victories, Jacob's laughter on a good day, the sparkle in his eyes when he managed to play catch. But they were tempered by the harsh reality of his condition. Through it all, Evelyn's love for Jacob remained unwavering. She was fiercely protective, sometimes stubbornly so, often pushing herself beyond her limits to ensure he never felt alone. Her sacrifice was quiet but profound, selling heirlooms, dipping into her savings, and eventually making the heart-wrenching decision to sell the family home and land to cover the mounting expenses. It was a choice that came with pain and guilt, but also a fierce determination. For Evelyn, no price was too high if it meant her grandson had a fighting chance. As she looked back on those years, she remembered the laughter and tears, the moments of doubt and the bursts of joy. Family was not perfect, but it was real, filled with love that endured through the hardest storms. And for Evelyn, that love was everything. The day life changed forever. It was a day that Evelyn would never forget, the kind of day that settles in the memory like a dark stain, impossible to wash away. A day when the rhythm of life, once steady and sure, was shattered in an instant, leaving behind nothing but a silence so loud it seemed to echo through every corner of her heart. Jacob was 12 years old. The sun had risen bright and clear that morning, casting golden light across the sleepy town where Evelyn lived. It was a day like any other, filled with the usual chatter over breakfast, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with toast, and the faint hum of a morning radio. But fate had other plans. The call came in the early afternoon, shattering the quiet with an urgency that made Evelyn's blood run cold. A neighbor, frantic and breathless, had reported an accident, a car collision on the highway not far from their home. Jacob had been riding his bike near the edge of town, and the driver hadn't seen him until it was too late. The details were a blur. Sirens, flashing lights, the smell of gasoline, paramedics working quickly to stabilize him before rushing him to the hospital. Evelyn remembered standing at the hospital waiting room, her hands clasped tightly in prayer, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and disbelief. The doctors were cautious but hopeful, telling her that Jacob's injuries were severe but treatable. There was talk of surgeries, rehabilitation, and a long road ahead. But beneath their clinical words lay the heavy weight of uncertainty. That night, Evelyn sat by Jacob's bedside, holding his small hand in hers, marveling at the resilience of this boy who had already faced so much. His eyes fluttered open briefly, and he managed a weak smile that broke through the fear and sorrow like a ray of light. Over the following weeks, the family was drawn into a whirlwind of hospital visits, therapy sessions, and medical consultations. Evelyn found herself navigating a maze of appointments, insurance claims, and paperwork, often staying at the hospital late into the night, exhausted but unwilling to leave Jacob's side. Her children tried to offer support, but their own lives were complicated, and the distance between them made it difficult to be fully present. Evelyn understood this, but it did little to ease the loneliness she felt in those moments of despair. As Jacob struggled to regain strength, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The accident had left him with lasting impairments, physical and emotional scars that would require ongoing care and adjustment. The dream of a carefree childhood had been replaced by the harsh demands of recovery and uncertainty. Evelyn was determined not to let this break her grandson's spirit. She became his fiercest advocate, fighting for the best treatments, pushing for therapies that might offer hope, and standing firm against the tide of doubt that sometimes threatened to overwhelm. But the cost was mounting. Medical bills piled up faster than the pennies in her savings jar. The house, once a warm refuge, began to feel like a burden, a reminder of a life that was slipping further away. It was during this time that Evelyn made the most difficult decision of her life: to sell the family home and the small plot of land that had been in her husband's family for generations. It was a choice born not from desire, but from necessity, a sacrifice she was willing to make to keep Jacob alive. Friends and neighbors whispered in sympathy, some offering help, others quietly judging the loss of such a cherished place. But Evelyn held her head high, knowing that love was the true inheritance she wanted to leave behind. The day the for sale sign went up on the front lawn was bittersweet. As she stood there, watching strangers walk through the rooms that had once been filled with laughter, she felt a pang of grief, but also a fierce hope. Hope that her sacrifice would give Jacob the chance to live, to grow, to find happiness despite the odds. In the quiet moments after the sale, when the house was empty and the echoes of the past lingered in the air, Evelyn found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The accidents, the hospital beds, the sleepless nights. Each had carved its mark on her soul. But beneath it all was an unshakable truth. Family was worth every sacrifice, every tear, every heartbeat spent in worry and prayer. That day, life changed forever. Not just for Jacob, but for Evelyn as well. She stepped into a new chapter, one defined by courage, resilience, and an enduring love that refused to be broken. And as she closed the door to the house she once called home, she carried with her the promise that no matter what the future held, she would never stop fighting for the boy who had captured her heart. Holding on amidst the storm life, Evelyn had learned over the years, rarely followed the plans we set out for it. Instead, it arrived with twists and turns, moments of joy abruptly shadowed by unexpected trials. After the accident, the days slipped by in a blur, each one a delicate balancing act between hope and heartbreak. Though the family home had been sold, the memories that filled its walls lingered, echoing softly in Evelyn's heart, like a distant melody she could never quite forget. She had traded the physical place where they had made so many memories for the uncertain promise of healing. The weight of that choice settled heavily on her shoulders as she adjusted to a new, quieter life in a small, rented apartment. The transition was harder than she had imagined. The space was cramped, unfamiliar, lacking the familiar creak of the wooden floors and the warm glow of the kitchen where Henry used to cook Sunday dinners. Nights were the loneliest, with shadows stretching long across the walls and the silence wrapping around her like a thick blanket. Yet, Even amidst the storm of change, Evelyn held on. For Jacob, she endured the endless rounds of therapy appointments, the frustration of slow progress, and the invisible wounds that no one else seemed to understand. She watched him with fierce pride as he fought to reclaim parts of himself. The strength in his legs, the confidence in his smile, the courage in his eyes. Time, however, was an unforgiving companion. There were birthdays missed, holidays celebrated through brief phone calls, and milestones marked by quiet tears. Evelyn often found herself sitting by the window, the world outside moving on without her, while she wrestled with the gnawing feeling of loss that never quite eased. One particularly cold winter evening, as snow gently blanketed the town, Evelyn received a call she had been dreading. Jacob's condition had taken a turn for the worse. A hospital admission was necessary, and the road ahead looked more daunting than ever. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty and exhaustion. Evelyn sat beside Jacob's hospital bed, holding his hand through fevered nights, and whispered words of encouragement. She traced the lines of his face, memorizing every detail, holding on to the hope that each new dawn might bring healing. During those long hours, memories flooded her mind. The times Jacob had come running into her arms after a scraped knee, the way his laughter used to fill the house like sunshine, the quiet moments when he confided his fears. Those memories were both a balm and a burden, reminding her of what was at stake. Friends and neighbors reached out, offering meals, prayers, and company, but Evelyn often felt isolated by the magnitude of what she was facing. The sacrifices she had made, the home she had sold, the savings she had depleted, felt invisible to most. Yet they were the foundation of the fragile hope she clung to. In quiet moments, she wrestled with the what-ifs. What if she had acted sooner? What if there was something more she could have done? What if the cost of her sacrifices would still not be enough? But even as doubt crept in, Evelyn's determination did not waver. She reminded herself daily that love was the strongest force she had, a light that could guide them through even the darkest nights. As the seasons changed, so did Jacob's journey. There were steps forward and steps back, moments of triumph and times of setback. But through it all, Evelyn remained his steadfast anchor, the person who believed in him when hope felt distant. Though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear. Evelyn's love was a fierce, unyielding force, a testament to the lengths a grandmother would go to save her grandson. And so, amid the storms of life, she held on, holding on to hope, to love, and to the unbreakable bond that defined them both. A song from the past. It was an ordinary afternoon when something small, almost unnoticed, stirred the dormant memories within Evelyn's heart. A song. The kind of old tune that, once heard, has a way of wrapping itself around the soul and pulling you back through time. She had been tidying the apartment, folding laundry, and arranging books on a shelf, when the gentle crackle of the radio filled the room. The soft voice of a singer came through, crooning a familiar melody she hadn't heard in years. It was a song Henry used to hum on summer evenings, a tune that had once been the soundtrack to their happiest days. Evelyn paused, hands stilling mid-fold. The words floated through the air, delicate and bittersweet, pulling her back to a porch swing bathed in the golden light of dusk, to warm hands and soft smiles. For a moment, the weight of years lifted. She was no longer alone in a small, quiet apartment, but sitting beside Henry, listening to that same song. The gentle sway of the world moving slowly around them. The music stirred more than just memories. It stirred emotions long tucked away. The ache of loss, the hope of healing, and the fierce love that had carried her through the hardest days. Evelyn allowed herself to sit with the feelings, letting the tears come quietly, unashamed. She hadn't realized how much she needed that moment, a reminder that love and life, no matter how painful, were woven together in a delicate dance. That evening, she found herself reaching for the old photo album stored in a box beneath the bed. Each photograph was a window into the past. Jacob's first steps, family picnics beneath sprawling oak trees, holidays filled with laughter and light. As she turned the pages, the song from the radio still played softly in her mind, a melody of resilience and remembrance. It was a gentle nudge, a whisper from the past, telling her that even in the darkest times, there was beauty to be found. The simple act of remembering became a balm for her weary soul. Evelyn realized that holding on to these fragments of joy did not mean clinging to the past, but rather carrying forward the love that defined it. The next day, buoyed by a renewed sense of purpose, Evelyn made a small change. She began to write letters to Jacob, not the kind one sends, but the kind one keeps close, filled with hopes, stories, and dreams for the future. Through the words, she found a new way to connect, a bridge between the pain of now and the possibilities of tomorrow. That song from the past had opened a door, inviting Evelyn to step through and embrace the fullness of her story, the grief, the love, and the unwavering strength that had become her legacy. In the quiet hum of that old melody, she found the courage to keep going, to keep fighting, and to keep believing in the healing power of hope. Opening the old wooden box. The box sat quietly in the corner of Evelyn's bedroom, tucked away beneath the faded quilt that once belonged to Henry. It was an ordinary wooden chest, simple, unassuming. But to Evelyn, it was a treasure trove of memories, a silent keeper of moments long past. That afternoon, stirred by the song from the radio and the gentle pull of nostalgia, Evelyn found herself reaching for it. The lid was heavy, worn smooth by years of hands opening and closing it. As she lifted it, a faint scent of cedar and old paper wafted upward, enveloping her in a comforting embrace. Inside lay a collection of keepsakes, yellowed letters tied with ribbon, black and white photographs curled at the edges, a faded handkerchief embroidered with delicate blue flowers, and a small silver locket that had belonged to her mother. She picked up a letter, its ink faded, but still legible. It was from Henry, written during their courtship, full of promises and dreams for a life they would build together. As Evelyn read, the words transported her to a time of hope and youthful love, a time before the shadows of loss had crept in. Next came photographs, Jacob as a toddler, grinning with untamed curls, family gatherings around a wooden table piled high with food and laughter, Henry and Evelyn dancing beneath the soft glow of porch lights. Each image told a story, a snapshot of joy amid the trials of life. Evelyn's fingers brushed over a folded piece of paper, a drawing Jacob had made in elementary school. It was a simple stick figure family, all smiles and sunshine. Tears welled in her eyes as she traced the lines, remembering the bright innocence of those days. The box also held more practical items, receipts from medical bills, notes scribbled with phone numbers and appointments, a faded prescription slip. These were the marks of the battle they had fought, reminders of the relentless fight to keep Jacob alive. As she sifted through the contents, Evelyn felt a stirring deep within her, a mixture of sorrow and strength, loss and love. This box was more than a container of objects. It was a testament to a life lived fully, with all its beauty and pain. Moved by the memories, Evelyn made a decision. She would not let these treasures gather dust, hidden away from the world. They were part of her story, part of Jacob's story, a legacy of resilience and hope that deserved to be shared. With renewed purpose, she began to organize the items carefully, preparing to create a scrapbook for Jacob. She wanted him to know the depth of love that surrounded him, the sacrifices made so he could have a chance at life, and the memories that would always be a part of him. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Evelyn sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by photographs and letters. She worked slowly, preserving each moment with gentle care, piecing together a tapestry of love that transcended time and hardship. Opening that old wooden box had awakened something in her, a call to remember, to honor, and to carry forward the story of a family bound by unbreakable ties. In the quiet of her apartment, with the world outside moving steadily on, Evelyn found solace in those memories, and in the knowledge that love, like the keepsakes she held, could endure beyond loss and time. The search for a solution. After the quiet evening spent opening the old wooden box and reliving the precious memories of Jacob's childhood and their family's past, Evelyn felt a renewed sense of determination. The weight of uncertainty still pressed down on her, but something inside her stirred. A quiet, steadfast resolve to find a way forward. Jacob's health had become the defining challenge of her life. Every day was a delicate balancing act, filled with questions, appointments, and the endless search for answers. It was clear that the medical bills were piling up faster than her savings, and the treatments, while necessary, were often painful and exhausting for her grandson. Evelyn knew she couldn't face this battle alone. The first step was to reach out, to ask for help where she could find it. Evelyn began by contacting the social worker at the hospital, someone who might guide her through the complex maze of insurance claims and financial assistance programs. The woman on the other end of the line was kind but firm, explaining the limited resources and the long waiting lists for aid. Still, Evelyn took every pamphlet, every number, every word, clinging to any sliver of hope. Next, she started calling specialists, doctors, and therapists, seeking second opinions, alternative treatments, anything that might ease Jacob's pain and offer a better quality of life. She kept a detailed notebook, jotting down each appointment, the results, and the next steps. Her days were filled with phone calls, trips to the pharmacy, and driving across town to therapy sessions that sometimes felt endless. Alongside the medical search was a more personal journey, speaking with family and friends. Evelyn reached out to neighbors who had offered support in the past, hoping to build a network of care. Some were able to help with meals or rides. Others simply offered a listening ear, a rare but precious gift in times of hardship. She also reached out to her children more often, trying to bridge the gap that distance and time had created. The conversations were sometimes difficult, marked by guilt, frustration, and the unspoken pain of what each of them was enduring. But Evelyn knew that family was essential, even when imperfect. Perhaps the most difficult step was the financial one. Selling the family home had helped cover immediate costs, but it wasn't enough to secure Jacob's long-term care. Evelyn considered everything: her savings, the heirlooms tucked away in that wooden box, even the idea of taking out loans. The weight of these decisions pressed on her, but her love for Jacob made every sacrifice feel necessary. One afternoon, while waiting in a sterile hospital corridor, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a message from a support group for families dealing with chronic illness. She had hesitated to join, unsure if sharing her story would bring comfort or pain. But something urged her to reach out. The group became a lifeline, a place to exchange stories, share resources, and find comfort in knowing she was not alone. Evelyn found herself encouraged by the strength of others, and in turn, her own courage grew. Back at home, she began to organize her efforts, balancing the demands of Jacob's care with the relentless paperwork and phone calls. There were moments of exhaustion when she sat at the kitchen table with tears streaming down her face, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of it all. But then, she would look at the photos spread across the table, the smiling faces of family, the small handprints on faded paper, and remember why she kept going. In those moments, Evelyn understood that the search for a solution was not just about medicine or money. It was about hope. It was about fighting for a future where Jacob could laugh, learn, and live with the freedom every child deserved. She didn't know what the outcome would be. There were no guarantees in this journey. But Evelyn's spirit remained unbroken, fueled by the unwavering love that had carried her through every storm. And so, with each phone call made, each appointment kept, and each small victory celebrated, Evelyn took one step closer to the future she dreamed of, for herself, for Jacob, and for the family that bound them together. Hidden truths revealed. The search for answers had been long and exhausting. Evelyn had poured every ounce of her energy and every penny she could muster into helping Jacob. But amid the tangled web of medical bills, insurance policies, and well-meaning but distant family members, something began to unravel. A secret, quietly lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. It happened one afternoon when Evelyn was sorting through some old paperwork she had tucked away in a drawer. Among the stacks of receipts, appointment reminders, and letters from doctors, she found a folder that didn't belong to her, a collection of documents that belonged to one of the agencies managing Jacob's care. Curious, she opened it. There, in black and white, were statements and correspondences that didn't add up. Bills for treatments Jacob hadn't received, records of payments made to unfamiliar names, and most troubling of all, notes suggesting that someone close had been mismanaging the funds meant for Jacob's care. Evelyn's heart pounded. How could this be? Who could she trust? She stared at the papers, the weight of betrayal settling heavily on her chest. With trembling hands, she began to dig deeper. Phone calls to the insurance company, consultations with lawyers, and conversations with hospital administrators slowly painted a grim picture. It seemed that amidst the chaos and desperation, someone had taken advantage, either through oversight or something more sinister. The discovery shook Evelyn to her core. It wasn't just the financial strain that threatened to overwhelm them anymore. It was the betrayal of trust. The very people who were supposed to help protect Jacob's future were now part of the problem. Evelyn was faced with a choice, whether to confront this hidden truth openly or try to protect her family from yet another pain. She wrestled with the decision, knowing that exposing the issue might strain relationships, but hiding it would only allow the damage to continue. Determined to stand for Jacob's sake, Evelyn took the painful step of confronting those involved. The conversations were difficult, filled with denial, excuses, and sometimes anger. But Evelyn held firm, armed with facts and an unyielding resolve. Along the way, she found unexpected allies. Hospital staff who were appalled by the situation, friends who offered emotional support, and even some family members who rallied to her cause once the truth was out. The journey to uncover and address the mismanagement was slow and arduous. Legal proceedings, audits, and meetings stretched on for months. Yet through it all, Evelyn never lost sight of her purpose: to protect Jacob and secure the care he desperately needed. The revelation also opened a new chapter of healing. Though the betrayal left wounds, it also brought clarity. Evelyn could now focus on rebuilding trust where it mattered most, with the people who truly cared and with Jacob himself. She shared the truth carefully with Jacob, mindful of his young heart, but honest enough to strengthen their bond. Together, they faced the challenges ahead, fortified by the knowledge that love and truth would guide their way. Evelyn's discovery was a painful but necessary turning point. It reminded her that even in the darkest times, hidden truths, when brought to light, can lead to justice, healing, and renewed hope. And as she held Jacob close that night, she knew their fight was far from over. But with truth on their side, They were stronger than ever. The unexpected visitor. The day had begun like any other, quiet and routine. But by the late afternoon, everything had shifted. Evelyn was sitting in her small living room, the evening light casting soft shadows through the lace curtains, when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. She wasn't expecting anyone. With a mix of curiosity and cautious hope, Evelyn made her way to the door and opened it slowly. Standing on the porch was a woman she hadn't seen in years, a figure from a chapter of her life long closed, yet one that now returned with surprising purpose. It was Clara, an old family friend, and the kind-hearted neighbor who had once been a constant presence during the early days of Jacob's illness. They had drifted apart as time pulled them in different directions, but Clara's eyes still held the same warmth and compassion Evelyn remembered. Without waiting for an invitation, Clara stepped inside, carrying a basket filled with home-baked bread and fresh fruit, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. "I heard about Jacob," Clara said softly, her voice laced with concern. "I wanted to see how you both are holding up." Evelyn felt a rush of gratitude and something she hadn't expected: relief. In the midst of her struggles, a familiar face, a reminder that she was not alone. The two women sat down, and Clara listened as Evelyn shared the recent challenges, the financial burdens, the hospital visits, and the weight of caregiving. Clara's presence was steady, a balm to Evelyn's weary spirit. As the conversation deepened, Clara revealed news that shifted everything: a connection to resources Evelyn hadn't known existed, community programs designed to help families like hers, and a network of support that could lighten the load. More than that, Clara brought something else: hope. Her visit sparked a series of changes. With Clara's encouragement and assistance, Evelyn was able to access new forms of aid, including counseling for caregivers, financial planning, and even respite care that allowed her brief moments of rest. But beyond the practical help, Clara's return stirred old friendships and new connections. She introduced Evelyn to other families facing similar challenges, creating a circle of solidarity that had been missing from her life. Together, they organized small gatherings, shared stories over cups of tea, and found strength in shared experiences. Evelyn no longer felt isolated, but part of a community bound by compassion and understanding. Perhaps most importantly, Clara's visit reminded Evelyn of the power of human connection, the simple act of reaching out, of being seen and heard. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Evelyn felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. The struggles were still there, but they no longer felt insurmountable. Clara smiled and took Evelyn's hand gently. "You've been so strong all this time, but you don't have to do it alone." Those words lingered in Evelyn's heart long after Clara left that night. They became a mantra, a source of comfort when the days were hard. In the months that followed, Evelyn embraced the support around her, allowing herself to lean on others without guilt. She discovered that vulnerability was not weakness, but a bridge to healing. The unexpected visitor had come not just with bread and fruit, but with a renewed sense of hope, and the promise that even in the darkest moments, kindness could light the way. And as Evelyn continued her journey with Jacob, she knew that with friends like Clara by her side, they could face whatever the future held. Together. The aftermath of the decision. The days after the decision to sell the family home passed in a strange haze for Evelyn. The physical move had been exhausting: the packing, the goodbyes to neighbors, the closing paperwork. But it was the emotional aftermath that pressed hardest on her spirit. Standing in the empty rooms one last time, she felt as though she were closing a chapter of her life. And yet, the story was far from over. The house, once full of life and laughter, now stood silent, its walls bare and cold. It was as if a part of Evelyn's heart had been peeled away, along with the furniture and photographs. The memories were all that remained, scattered across the worn floorboards, whispering stories of joy and sorrow, of family dinners and quiet nights by the fire. Yet, despite the ache, there was a strange sense of relief. The sale brought in funds that allowed Jacob to continue his treatments without the crushing worry of immediate bills. It bought time, precious time for healing and hope. But that relief was tempered by guilt and fear. Had she done the right thing? Was the price she paid worth it? The loss of a home that held so much history felt like a sacrifice made at a steep cost. In the quiet moments alone, Evelyn grappled with these questions. Nights were especially hard. The silence seemed louder and the shadows deeper. She often found herself clutching an old photo of Henry and Jacob, seeking comfort in their smiles. The family tried to rally around her, but their own lives kept them at a distance. Calls were more frequent now, filled with words of encouragement, but Evelyn longed for the warmth of presence, not just voice. Jacob's health fluctuated during this time. Some days he showed remarkable strength, playing with a resilience that defied his condition. Other days the illness weighed heavily, drawing him inward, leaving Evelyn feeling helpless despite her tireless care. Amid the chaos, Evelyn's own health began to waver. Years of stress and sleepless nights took their toll, and she found herself battling fatigue and aches she could no longer ignore. Still, she pressed on, her love for Jacob a fuel that would not let her quit. She sought solace in small routines: morning walks around the block, cups of chamomile tea, and moments of quiet reflection. These rituals offered brief reprieves from the storm, pockets of peace amidst the turmoil. Friends and neighbors who had once offered support now checked in regularly, bringing meals or simply sitting quietly with her. Their presence was a balm, a reminder that she was not alone. Evelyn also began attending a local support group for caregivers, finding strength in shared stories and the understanding that came from others walking similar paths. The group became a lifeline, a space where she could express her fears and frustrations without judgment. Through it all, Evelyn's resolve hardened. She was determined to face the aftermath with courage, to navigate the uncertainties with grace, and to hold on to hope even when it seemed fragile. The journey was far from easy, marked by moments of despair and bursts of unexpected joy. But Evelyn knew that love, fierce, unyielding, and steadfast, was the compass that would guide them through. And so, amidst the aftermath of sacrifice and change, Evelyn held on to the promise that each day brought a chance for healing, connection, and a future worth fighting for. Goodbye or healing? The days that followed the most difficult decisions in Evelyn's life were a whirlwind of emotions: sadness, fear, hope, and sometimes an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. The family home was gone, the savings dwindled, and yet the fight to keep Jacob's life afloat carried on with relentless determination. But amid the chaos, a question lingered in Evelyn's heart. Was this journey leading toward a final goodbye or a chance for healing? The distinction was subtle, yet profound. Some days, the weight of what had been lost pressed down so heavily that Evelyn felt as though she were saying farewell. Not just to a home or to financial security, but to a life she had once known. She mourned the innocence lost, the dreams deferred, and the bright future that now seemed uncertain. The quiet moments were filled with bittersweet reflections, and the tears she shed were both for Jacob and for herself. But other days, a fragile hope flickered. It was in the smile Jacob managed on a good morning, in the small victory of a therapy session that showed progress, in the unexpected kindness of a stranger. These moments whispered that healing was possible, that the love and sacrifice poured into this journey could bear fruit. Evelyn found herself caught between these two worlds, the pain of goodbye and the promise of healing. One afternoon, Jacob's doctor delivered news that brought both relief and new challenges. His condition was stable, though not cured, and a new treatment plan might improve his quality of life. The road ahead remained difficult, but the possibility of healing, physical, emotional, and familial, shone through the clouds. Evelyn shared the news with Jacob gently, her voice steady but filled with warmth. They talked about dreams, fears, and the small hopes that kept them moving forward. In those conversations, the bond between them deepened, built on trust, resilience, and the shared understanding that life's journey was rarely simple. The family, too, began to come together in new ways. James and Laura, inspired by Evelyn's strength, made efforts to be more present, coordinating visits and calls with greater care. Old wounds began to soften as forgiveness and understanding took root, though not without effort and patience. Evelyn herself embraced opportunities for healing. She sought counseling to process the grief and stress that had accumulated over years of caregiving. She reconnected with friends and neighbors, allowing herself to receive support and companionship. In moments of quiet reflection, she found peace in knowing that healing was not a destination, but a journey, a series of small steps forward, often mixed with setbacks, but always guided by love. There were still days when the weight of it all threatened to overwhelm her, when the temptation to surrender whispered softly in her ear. But each time, she remembered the reason she fought so hard: Jacob's bright eyes, his laughter, his resilience. The choice between goodbye and healing was not a simple one. Sometimes they existed side by side, grief and hope, loss and renewal, tears and smiles. Evelyn learned to hold both, embracing the complexity of her emotions without judgment. In doing so, she found a strength that was quiet but unbreakable. And as the seasons turned, she saw that the journey was not defined by the hardships endured, but by the courage to continue, to love, to forgive, and to heal. In the end, Evelyn chose healing. A moment on the porch. The afternoon sun cast a warm golden glow over the neighborhood as Evelyn settled into her favorite spot, a creaky wooden rocking chair on the small porch of her apartment. For a while, Evelyn allowed herself to simply watch and listen, absorbing the ordinary beauty of the day. The world moved on around her, relentless yet comforting in its constancy. Beside her on the small table lay an unfinished letter, the ink slightly smudged from hesitant hands. It was addressed to Jacob, a letter she had begun weeks ago but had yet to finish. In it, she poured out her thoughts, hopes, and unspoken truths, writing words she feared might never be said aloud. She took up the pen again, tracing the familiar loops of cursive, each stroke a quiet act of love. Writing to Jacob gave her a way to reach beyond the difficulties, to bridge the gaps that illness and distance had created. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Evelyn closed the letter and folded it carefully. She tucked it into an envelope, pressing it gently as if sealing her heart within. The porch was a place of stillness, where past and present converged. It held echoes of laughter from family gatherings, the creak of Henry's favorite rocking chair, and the soft patter of Jacob's footsteps as a child chasing butterflies. Evelyn leaned back, eyes closed, feeling the cool evening breeze brush against her face. Memories floated up. Sunday afternoons filled with stories, the warmth of shared meals, the quiet comfort of holding hands during hard times. The porch was more than just wood and nails. It was a sanctuary of the soul, a place where love lingered in the air like the scent of wildflowers. In that moment, Evelyn understood that while the journey had been marked by loss and sacrifice, it was also filled with enduring love and resilience. The porch, with its gentle rocking and open view, was a reminder that life, in all its complexity, was worth holding on to. As dusk settled and the first stars twinkled overhead, Evelyn sat quietly, heart full. The world was vast and unpredictable, but here, on this humble porch, she found peace. And in that peace, she knew she could face whatever tomorrow might bring. Acceptance and renewal. The seasons had cycled through many changes since Evelyn first made the difficult choice to sell the family home, trading familiarity for the hope of a brighter future for Jacob. Now, as late autumn's cool winds whispered through the bare branches of the trees lining her street, Evelyn sat quietly reflecting on the path that had brought her here, a journey marked by sacrifice, heartache, and unexpected strength. Acceptance was not a sudden arrival, but a gradual unfolding, a gentle easing into the reality of life's unpredictability. Evelyn had wrestled with grief, frustration, and fear, but over time she found that these emotions did not define her. Rather, they were threads woven into the rich tapestry of her experience. She had come to understand that life was not about perfect endings, but about finding peace amid imperfection. This truth settled deep within her, like the roots of an old tree that weather storms yet stands tall. Evelyn's days now held a quiet rhythm. Simple moments of gratitude and reflection, walks through the crisp air, and visits with friends who had become pillars of support. The small apartment she called home was filled with mementos of her past and symbols of hope for the future, a reminder that life, though changed, still held beauty and meaning. Jacob's health remained a delicate balance. There were good days filled with laughter and dreams, and harder days tempered by the realities of his condition. Yet, the bond between grandmother and grandson had only deepened, strengthened by every shared challenge and triumph. In this season of acceptance, Evelyn found renewal, a rekindling of spirit that nourished her soul and energized her heart. She began to explore interests she had set aside, tending a small herb garden on her windowsill, joining a local book club, and volunteering at the community center to help others facing similar struggles. These activities brought new light into her life, reminding her that while caregiving was a profound responsibility, she was also deserving of joy and connection. It was a lesson learned through hard experience, but embraced with open arms. Evelyn also embraced forgiveness, both of others and of herself. She released the heavy burden of guilt that had shadowed her decisions, understanding that she had done everything within her power out of love. Forgiving the imperfections of family relationships allowed healing to bloom where bitterness had once threatened to take root. As she looked forward, Evelyn saw possibilities rather than limitations. The challenges remained, but they were met with a calm resilience forged in the fires of hardship. One crisp morning, standing at the edge of a park bathed in golden light, Evelyn felt a quiet gratitude swell within her. She thought of Henry and the family they had built, of Jacob's laughter and courage, and of the journey that had tested and shaped her. Life had changed, yes, but it had not broken her. Acceptance was not surrender, but a powerful choice to embrace life as it was, with all its beauty, pain, and promise. It was a decision to move forward with grace, courage, and an open heart. And in that choice, Evelyn found renewal, not just in herself, but in the love that connected her to those she cherished most. The future remained unwritten, but with acceptance as her compass, Evelyn was ready to walk whatever path lay ahead, hand in hand with hope. The gift of love and sacrifice. As the twilight years of Evelyn's life unfolded, she often found herself reflecting on the journey she had walked, a path marked by sacrifice, love, resilience, and unyielding hope. The story of her life with Jacob was not one of grand triumphs or dramatic victories, but of quiet strength, everyday courage, and the profound power of love. Evelyn had given up much: her family home, financial security, and the comfort of certainty. But in return, she had received something far greater: the unbreakable bond with her grandson and the deep knowledge that love, in its purest form, demands sacrifice. She had watched Jacob grow through pain and healing, laughter and tears, setbacks and breakthroughs. Each step forward was a testament to the will to live and the love that surrounded him. And through it all, Evelyn's heart remained steadfast, a constant beacon of hope in a world that often felt uncertain. Her sacrifices were not made lightly. They were woven with moments of doubt, exhaustion, and fear. But love had been her guide, the fierce, selfless kind that does not ask for recognition but gives freely and without hesitation. Evelyn understood now that family was not merely defined by blood or shared history, but by the acts of devotion that bind hearts together. It was in the late-night vigils at hospital beds, the whispered prayers for healing, the gentle hands that offered comfort, and the unwavering presence when the world seemed cold and distant. Her story was one echoed in countless lives: grandparents caring for grandchildren, parents sacrificing for children, loved ones giving all they have so others might have a chance. It was a reminder that the most profound gifts often come wrapped in hardship, and that true love is measured not by grand gestures, but by everyday acts of kindness and endurance. Evelyn hoped that those who heard her story would see beyond the pain to the beauty of the human spirit, the capacity to love without limits and to find strength in vulnerability. She wished for others to know that even when life's storms rage fierce, the heart has an incredible ability to heal, to forgive, and to carry on. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and a soul touched by grace, Evelyn looked toward the future, not knowing what it held, but trusting in the love that had brought her this far. Her journey was a gift, a legacy passed down not through possessions, but through the enduring power of love and sacrifice. And that, she knew, was the truest inheritance of all. Evelyn's story is a heartfelt journey through love, sacrifice, and resilience, a powerful testament to the enduring bond between a grandmother and her grandson. Faced with overwhelming challenges, from Jacob's serious illness to the loss of the family home, Evelyn's unwavering devotion guided every difficult decision she made. Her sacrifices, selling treasured possessions, navigating complex medical and financial struggles, and coping with loneliness, highlight the profound lengths a person will go to protect those they love. Throughout the story, Evelyn experiences the full spectrum of human emotion: grief, hope, betrayal, and healing. She confronts hidden truths and unexpected visitors, discovers new sources of support, and learns to accept imperfection both in herself and others. Her journey reminds us that while life's hardships can test us deeply, they also reveal our inner strength and capacity for love. The narrative's most compelling lesson is that true love is selfless and often demands sacrifice, but it also brings renewal and connection. Evelyn's story shows that healing is not a destination, but a continuous process, one that includes forgiveness, community, and acceptance. Even when faced with loss and uncertainty, holding on to hope and leaning on others can light the way forward. In the end, Evelyn's legacy is not measured by what she lost, but by the unbreakable spirit and unconditional love she gave. Her experience speaks to anyone who has faced adversity in the name of family, offering comfort and inspiration. It reminds us that the greatest gifts are often intangible, found in moments of courage, kindness, and enduring love. This story invites readers to reflect on their own lives and relationships, encouraging them to cherish what truly matters and to recognize the quiet heroes among us who give so much without asking for anything in return. Thank you for spending this time with me, reflecting on a story of love and sacrifice that reminds us all what family truly means. Wherever you're watching from, may you find peace in your own journey. If this story touched your heart, The next video will take us even deeper into the lives of grandmothers who quietly shape our world. I hope you'll join me again soon.